Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alan Gray, and I work with the West Florida Regional Planning Council. We've taken on a new task, and we've invited you all to join in on that task, and that task is to discuss restoring the grid for the city of Pensacola. I've got alongside me, actually, as our chief facilitator today for our meeting, someone who you're going to have to help me, Dan. Time Magazine named the most important, one of the six most important innovators in the world, and this was in 2001. So we actually were able to get someone that I think was a magnificent get for the city of Pensacola, someone who's worked for thousands of different communities across the United States, and whose presentation we're going to be looking at tonight and listening to tonight. I think we also should bear in mind that we've got quite a few people that are involved heavily in our community present today. We've got some elected officials, but we've also got a great deal of staff level folks here. I can see one. I've got Al Garza with the City of Pensacola, the gray shirt there. I've got Derek with the City of Pensacola. He's our public information in the Argyle shirt. And then Jessica is also sitting beside him. For the staff that also work alongside us with the Planning Council, I've got Bill Compton here in the very front. I see I've got Alex Geese in the back with the maroon shirt. I've got Rhonda Grice with the black overshirt. I've got Christy Johnson with the black and blonde in the very back. I've got Terry Joseph. She's wearing pink right here. And I think you should just recognize all these staff are here to help you throughout the different parts of the night. And I missed one. Mary Robinson is also here with the white and the green. She's director of our transportation division. Now for our elected officials, I've got in the front I see Brian Spencer. You all know him. We've also got Sherry Myers right here, yellow. Have I missed anyone? Staff or elected officials, please raise your hand. Okay. Well, folks, that's the team we've established here. Obviously, our presenter is going to start up in a minute, but I thought it would be wise for us to sort of talk about what you see in the room right now. Obviously, we've got some graphics up in the room, and they represent different different images of our downtown area that we're going to be focusing on with this presentation. You can see chiefly the area around 9th and East Government is what we've photographed and shown you in these blow-ups here on the side. The reason that we're talking about that tonight is because that was really the impetus of the discussion between the city and the Planning Council. They've asked us to come in and do what we feel, after looking at some of the video from the March 19th Committee of the Whole meeting here in this room. It was clear that the people in this neighborhood and the people of the city of Pensacola were asking for involvement in the process. I think it's evident that at some point in the history of our city, the public was not involved, and they actually spoke out against some changes that were made in the downtown, and those changes went ahead and were made by the city. And now we are here 30 years later, still addressing multiple times the same topic, and I think that people rightfully so asked to be involved again. So when we say that we're here to address a certain goal, that goal is your involvement. And I think tonight's meeting is going to be the real kickoff for this type of involvement that we have planned for you. It doesn't end here. And in fact, it doesn't end at the last meeting at the end of July. And it doesn't end when we go and present these findings that the groups come up with in August to the City Council. The truth is, this process is going to develop over the years. And this is going to be, I guess what they say, a long task that we need to get our minds adjusted to. This doesn't happen next week. This isn't something that just happens to us all of a sudden. This is something that we need to be involved in, and I think you're going to come to understand that once you see a presentation that we're going to have for you tonight. I'm going to switch microphones and do a quick little, if everyone can see this, I don't think we have too much light perhaps. I'm going to switch microphones on you and go to a workstation here if you allow me. I know you may not be able to see me, but I really want you to take a look at our screen here. Let's go down a little bit more with the light, please. Everyone looking at this and can see it? There's actually a TV in the back of the building as well, and you can hear me. What we're looking at is an interface using the tool Google Earth. A lot of you have seen it and used it. I think we can recognize here the newly built Admiral Mason Park. I think we see Aragon Court just north here. We can see our Coliseum here. We can see the 110 sort of flyovers and drop downs onto Chase and Garden. The reason I'm navigating you to this area is because this area has quite a bit of interest, and let me sort of detail the area that I'm showing of interest here. The areas you see blocked out in red. I don't know if any of you saw me out there, but I was sweating and walking around this exact area, all the way up through from Romana south to the Bayfront Parkway, down Government Street, up to Palafox. If you had a flyer in your mail, or in your door, or in, stuffed in the gate of your house, this is the district that I chose to do a direct interface with information, and the information you got was a Restore the Grid flyer. So this is the area of interest right now because we've basically chosen the area that we think is influenced heavily by the intersection of East Government and South 9th Avenue, or South 9th Street, sorry. I've got some other images that I wanted to throw up here, and the first one is going to be a very old image. This, in fact, is our city's map as it stood in 1919. So we're getting around 100 years ago. With this map, you can see a well-established grid. You don't see 110. In fact, another thing you don't see, you see this relic here, that's just a wharf. It does not actually continue to a bridge. So there's actually no bridge going to Gulf Breeze at this time in the history of the city. But you see a great deal of wharfs this direction, and you see a pretty established grid system in the city. And you also notice there's a connection here. Let me flash off of the 1919 image so you can see where we're at. Well, it's not perfectly lined up, but the connection that I was describing there is between 9th and East Government. It was a connected street back in 1919. If we go forward to 1935, we see the same phenomena. There was a connection, amazingly enough, between some of the gridded streets in our downtown, and there was no Bayfront Parkway. This land was underwater for much of the area. Let me turn it off so you can see some of the area behind it, so you see where we're talking about. There's no Bayfront Parkway as there is today. You can see it traversing our waterfront here. In 1964, a pretty interesting image was attained from our Beacon building. The Historic Registry had a pretty decent relic here. Let me pull this to full screen so we can take a look at this. This image actually shows us our downtown. So we've got our bearings here. You see our old ball field, and what you see here is 9th Avenue with a feature of just a bend, and it continued on to Government Street here. So in 1964, actually the year that our Regional Planning Council was founded, there was connectivity on East Government and 9th, and there's actually connectivity in this form all the way till 1981. In 1981, a project was undertaken to improve both 9th Avenue as well as create Bayfront Parkway. Let me turn this back off, and we can look at our view today. In fact, I'm going to kind of go back to our view in 1994, if you'll allow me just one second. In 1994, we had the facility completed for Bayfront Parkway, and you can see that the different turning features here, and you can also see the abandoned, or now at the time abandoned, Admiral Mason Park. What you'll notice here from this picture from 1994 is there is no more connectivity between East Government. It's a rough picture, I understand, but you see the connectivity is lost between this, what was a major thoroughfare in our downtown, a major artery of our downtown's traffic, was now lost at this point. In fact, it was lost in 1981. It is determined that back in 1970, the Historic Preservation Board established a plan whereby they would insulate the historic district, which was some of the district I had showed you guys in that polygon a moment ago. They would insulate the district from the automobile, and in doing so, they needed to acquire a lot of right-of-way and require a lot of areas and land to actually make terminations like we have on East Government. But that's not our only termination. As many of you know, residents of downtown, we have a termination here on the south end of Florida Blanca. There's even a cutout where there was probably someone thinking that maybe we would have traffic coming across Bayfront, but it's not there. There isn't traffic there. So I'm just trying to give you a snapshot of our history, and if you come back and sort of look at our city, you see that we've got a pretty healthy grid in most portions of our town, In fact, I think I can mention some projects that are underway right now. We are, as a city, removing the one-way feature on a few streets. Those are Balin and Spring Street. Those two-way features are going to be coming soon. I don't know the exact date. I'm not sure when the projects begin. But let me talk about a project that did already occur where a one-way street turned into a two-way street, and I think it's a pretty significant success story, and that's Palafox. Palafox used to be a one-way facility, which I'm lost. Anyone? There. Am I there? I'm there. Okay, this is Palafox. It used to be a one-way facility, and it's now, as we know, a two-way facility with some interesting parking features I think we can all look at here and know what's going on. These are our reverse-end parking spots. But this is obviously where there's a plaza or a median in between Palafox. But here's what we're talking about. This area of Palafox was one-way for a long, long time. Right now we have a two-way facility. We have, there's our new friends right here, our World of Beer that opened up this week. Don't want to tell you how many times I've been in yet. There's a lot of success on Palafox is the point I'm bringing to you. This is just sort of the background. We had a two-way street. Now I think there's a lot of activity going on with this facility, and I think we're going to let the presentation go to our phase of bringing our presenter here. So I think we've got a background. I think we understand that there's obviously some connectivity in our city, that we have now a new phase. And I'm going to blank your screen for just a second, and then we're going to have our meeting facilitator, Dan, take over.
We had questions during the presentation.
It would be good to ask during the presentation. Yes.
I was wondering why the connectivity between Government Street and 9th Avenue was abandoned around the time that Bayfront Parkway was put in. Was it an agreement that we had to make with the state in order for them to fund Bayfront Parkway, or was it just a timing matter?
No, it was by design. There was a plan that was developed by the Historic District in 1970 that actually the plan was to abandon the access at the end of East Government and several other streets. That really didn't come into fruition until the opportunity presented itself in 1981. With those improvements also came along the terminus of East Government. So the improvements to 9th, South 9th, and Bayfront Parkway, those projects were all tied into one project, which included the abandonment of East Government.
So it wasn't an agreement or a stipulation that the state put on the city in order to get the funding for Bayfront Parkway?
I don't know. I can ask that question of some of the folks that were at the city at the time, but I don't have an answer for that. I do know that it was part of the plan that the city put forth from the Historic District Board, and that the city was acting on recommendations of the Historic Board at the time. It's also notable at that time that the citizens also petitioned at that time to not terminate it. Sort of, we're at the same point today as we were 30 years ago. But obviously the project is in the potentially different direction.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, Pensacola. I'm pleased to be back. I used to live in Pensacola about 1965 to 1967. Didn't own a car and would just ride my bike everywhere. I was one of the first students at the University of West Florida. So I'm very proud of that. But anyway, I want to share with you, to draw in on the topic of restoring the grid and all the issues that are associated with the neighborhood, to share with you what's going on at a national level as people are now wanting to walk more, bike more, have more active lives, better social engagement, higher property values. So let me just jump right in. I tend to be a very visual person, but I have been on the road now pretty seriously for 16 years and work in about 200 towns every year. So I have a lot of comparisons and contrasts on how the sciences are being applied to rebuilding downtowns and great neighborhoods everywhere. With that, I know it's hard to see here. Can we turn off as many lights as we can? I know the emergency lights will stay on. But yeah, so let me start with the notion or the assumption that if the gentleman in the left panel is imagining what the world should be, he wants a world where children can run as free-range children, that the way he did, that people socialize, businesses thrive. But the reality has become, over time, that we sit in our cars more than we'd like to. We have endless areas that have no character or personality. As we get older, we realize we forgot to complete the sidewalks, all of the things you see, parents rushing their children across the street. Indeed, if we want to see as bad as it can get, we go to Tallahassee. This is Tennessee. Every year I worked there for 16 years, another person would lose their life trying to cross this street. Because we only had one focus. How can we move traffic as fast and efficiently as we can? Now we're waking up and we're realizing that as we've been doing this and modeling and predicting how much added lanes or intersection capacity we need, something happened that we didn't expect. As good as our modeling was, we always overshot our models. So the question comes up, why was that happening? And as it turns out, that as we made it easier for people to flee, to live further away, we were inducing sprawl, we were inducing trips that otherwise would not be occurring. And this is just one of many manifestations of the approach we are taking forever. But here's a very interesting thing that started to happen around 2004, well before the recession, well before the economic meltdown was occurring. We were leveling out our desire to drive more. Today we know our children are less interested in driving. In fact, many are putting off when they get a driver's license for quite a number of years. And the boomers, I'm a boomer, or I'm actually a pre-boomer, we're all deciding we don't want to drive as much. So we're going to see a certain leveling, and indeed some predictions are now we already hit peak VMT in our country. And people want to live closer to their downtown or in their downtown. This means we will take a totally different approach to how we design our cities. So more and more people are asking for places that they can get to in shorter distances, whether they drive, use transit, walk, or bike. We're still going to have cars, and we're still going to depend on them heavily, but we're not going to depend on them as heavily as we did in the past. I took this picture years ago when I thought the gases had really gone high, and then today I'd love to have this be a possibility. But keep in mind that our homes that we are buying way out were being fueled by what was still appearing to us to be cheap fuel, inexpensive fuel. So here's where we are and where we're likely to be going in the near future. One neighborhood at a time, sometimes one street or even one block at a time, is now going to become a complete street, a street that anyone can choose whatever mode of transportation they want, any age, any level of ability. The goal should be, and Florida's actually been leading the nation on this since about 1991, that we would always try to put in what we failed to put in originally in order to make walking, biking, transit somewhat competitive. And so all we now need to do is go to those cities that have been doing the most, for example, Madison, Wisconsin, and almost anywhere I point the camera, I can get scenes like this, simply because they've been working on it, and they've been working on it a long time. Now, what that gets us to is why cities exist in the first place. And as old as the hills, nobody has ever come up with a better word to describe why cities exist other than to maximize exchange. But not just of our service products and goods, which are our jobs, the exchange of our culture, our history, of friendship, our knowledge, our wisdom, our passion, the things that build and hold communities together. And so now that we realize this, we put less insistence that we're just going to keep meeting the demand of growing our traffic constantly, and now come back and try to build the kind of a social fabric that will allow the prosperity that we seek. Michigan has been at this longer than we have. They've been working on it for over 20 years, since they've been in the recession for 20 years. And this is an excellent book to get a hold of. What they are predicting, going to the top economists in America, is the future cities are going to be built on place. That the small jobs that are going to be created are going to hold on to their employees because of a good neighborhood, a good city life, and not for the reasons that cities were growing for a long time. The gentleman I'm shaking hands with, Dan Buettner, has invited me in to a number of Iowa cities now to extend the quality of life and the longevity of people in towns. And what he knows is we can increase people's longevity and the quality of their life by 7 years. But the number one thing is to focus on the built environment. And that's really what we're talking about today. How do we go from where we were to where we want to be? The other real important point for tonight is that with the process we're following, with this set of meetings, we're no longer going to go the old way of doing things where you basically hire the best experts you can get and then have them to come in and present what they concluded to the public. The future model is to engage the public early on, even before you let a contract for the design, and this is truly the purpose of tonight, to gather your ideas as the first part and then start to gather data and crunch data and then come up with solutions that are based on the needs of the neighborhood and the needs of the community as a whole. With the idea being that if there's a strong, compelling vision that you've built and then a plan can emerge from that, that we will build to the best that we're capable of and not just take whatever happened to us in a series based on history. To show you that this is real, I want to show you this scene. It's Orange Beach, Gulf Shores, Alabama. This is Canal Road. Some of you may know that road. We had done some work with the community, and that night when I was doing the final presentation, I knew what was about to unfold because it had been explained to me. But when I just showed this picture, I know that the community wants a village here, and then knew what the state was about to do to blow it into 5 lanes. When I showed this transition, the traffic engineer, some of you may know her, Kit, was crying. And I asked Kit, why are you crying? I'd never seen a traffic engineer cry before. And she said, Dan, that's at 90% plans completion. We can't stop it. And then there was a pause, and she said, can we? And I said, well, Kit, you're the traffic engineer. If anyone can stop it, it's you. Kit worked with the state, got the 2 communities to work together, and they're now building to this vision. They're going to move their traffic better, quieter, smoother, much safer, and now they'll have a village and people won't have to travel as far. They're also going to create a brand new code, a form-based code, so that the buildings will act the way they want them to and things like that. So I show that because a place very nearby is already looking at how they can transform their communities to be more focused on people and less on speed. They're also going to take advantage of a 12 square mile preserve. They want a trail, and we can get funding for the trail, but we point out if we're not going to build those additional 2 lanes, there still has to be an evacuation route. And so our idea is they'll build the trail about 14 feet wide, and then FEMA will be able to pay for this trail as an added escape route when the hurricanes hit. So we're starting to learn to use monies in wiser, more supportive ways of meeting all of our goals and objectives. Now, to get into the actual issues, one of the things I always ask each audience I work with to consider is what is it you value the most? All design should radiate out for what your neighborhood cares about the most. And am I right that some of the things we see on this list are those things that you value? In fact, I probably should ask this question earlier. How many folks here are from the neighborhood? a very outstanding number. Okay, good. So I think it's important, though, that everywhere I go, people want to know their neighbors, to feel like they're part of the decision-making process, that it's a good place to raise their family, that somebody could find some shade in their neighborhood and come and get on the internet. All these are images that seem to resonate everywhere I go. And as I was able to walk through and enjoy Seville Square last night, all the great events going on, and the wonderful businesses, seeing all the things going on, it meant a lot to me. So let's start with the fact that Government Street and the entire greater area, the neighborhood, is the real deal. That out in the burbs, there's no way that you can fake what you've got here. That as I travel through the neighborhood, I realize you've got a very rich and deep cultural history, buildings that have been cared for and loved for a long time, streets that work. All of these are scenes that I've shot over multiple visits I've made to the neighborhood. And to see the diversity of housing stock and size and scale and character, but all fitting together because nobody came in and bulldozed them. To understand the value of each street and the function of each street to hold the neighborhood together becomes a very important part of any analysis. You have a lot of choices you can make. The street is never complete. As people want to do other things than they have in the past, then we are able to find great ways to modify streets. And you've been doing that. And you've been building some great placemaking, important, iconic figures. And again, caring for buildings that have been with us, it seems like, ever since Florida was first settled. And now new buildings that still honor that character, the personality of place, and help to define new parks, new streets, new gateways, and at the same time, many buildings that are now transforming in the use because the buildings were designed so they could be transformed to become not just residences, but places of business as well. And all of these things, of course, set the stage for what will you want to express tonight and in the future meetings about what these streets should be. Should they remain, for example, one way, or would they function better as two-way? And I'm going to show you a bunch of tools that people are using to hold the speeds down and to give themselves better connectivity and a better way to go places that they'd like to get across streets and things like that. So let me introduce a few of the tools. I think for most of you, these are not going to be new, but some of the statistics might be. The street on the left is in Birmingham, Michigan. When I drive down it, I will monitor the speed of the driver. And then we get to another section of the same road where there are no trees. The speeds go up anywhere from 5 to 15 miles per hour. And it doesn't matter which motors I'm following, it's almost automatic. So there's a value to having walls of trees that face off your streets, not only to keep your home cooling bills down, but also to keep your speeds down. So trees should be considered a very valuable tool as we look at what we can do. Trees, depending on the species you select and your choices of plantings, help define the character of the neighborhood. They can enhance the historic buildings. They can properly integrate with the streets. For example, this is a street over in St. Augustine, Palatka area, that keeps the speeds down because of its design. Keeping in mind the pattern, the brick in this case, the width, the dimension of the street, it still performs its most essential function, and that's to give people access to their properties. Or in this case, the value of having the homes and the streets work together. Another set of tools very quickly, tree wells. If we use tree wells on our streets, we can free up the sidewalks of the task of having to support the trees and now have the the street be very green, very cool, and also help bring down the speeds. So these are all tools that are being used in quite a number of cities around the country. And again, getting the green, the liveliness, the compactness. Rain gardens. I don't know, in Pensacola, are you now using rain gardens? It's a fairly new tool. It allows us to absorb the water in place and not have to pipe it off into exotic other locations at much, much higher costs. And trees will do a good job of that, but the rain gardens do it as well. So when you go to reconstruct a street, think about the value of using curb extensions and other tools that bring down the amount of water that has to work its way to the bay or some expensive treatment facility. I've worked in towns recently where we showed them that they could reduce the size of their new sewage treatment plants by 50%, cut their cost dramatically by using treatment systems where we just treat water in place. Now this is the big topic of the evening, and that is how important is it to have street networks? As towns have lost their grid, they've seen some results that they were not overly pleased with. The origin of this practice has nothing to do with transportation. It was actually the Federal Housing Administration that started to cul-de-sac the streets of America. And the banks obviously were supporters of that because they wanted to be able to get the secondary mortgages. So this whole concept to deconnect the streets goes way back before you started to do it in your downtown. And yeah, I think we can see the effects. For example, almost any planner in the room I know is going to recognize Savannah on the left, one of the most walkable cities in the entire South. The street on the right, which is Irvine, California, there is no one able to walk there other than to stay on their own block or something like that. So I think you can see the importance of networking in terms of getting people to go the places that they'd like to get. So if we follow this map through, this is the great fortunate that most of the downtown has been built on where you can stay off of the principal roads. But then we went to this concept and really basically did it to the exclusion of any other connected system. And that's what's forced us to build such big and powerful roads and quite often to only have one way of getting around. We're now likely to go much, much further back to having a connected grid system. You can see it, I think, in terms of how big and powerful the roads have to become. Once you lose the grid and you go to disconnected streets, it's necessary to have bigger, wider, faster roads and intersections. And this really raises the cost of our personal transportation. You can see it with the developer. Notice in this case he's cut himself off from the water for all the homes back beyond the water. And here's the key point. If people have access to the water and numerous points of access to the water, every home goes up in value. And sometimes not just a few percentile points, but major percentage points. The more connection we have to the water can get across big roads and do it in a nice way by bringing the speeds down and designing correctly, then all homes go up in value. Now let's go to a place that has pretty much lost it all. This is Roswell, Georgia, a suburb to Atlanta. You can see they got plenty of streets, but how many of these connect? So we do an X-ray. And with the X-ray, we realize only 22% of the streets connect. People in Roswell, Georgia, on average, will spend 2 hours a day in their car because they don't have the connectivity that other people in other parts of Atlanta do. So let's play a game real quick. This is a development proposal for this kind of a layout. 500 trips based on 50 homes. That's 10 trips per household per day, which is a pretty good, safe bet. And you can see some homes are not going to be worth as much as others. And you can see the distribution of trips. Now, if we only made one link, we're cutting the traffic by any particular person's house in half. If we add another road, you can see we go clear down to 125. 4 roads, you can see again that everyone's lightening the impact. Then go up to an actual gridded pattern, and I think you see the numbers really drop. And then, of course, we can go up from there. And then, of course, work with topography and all the other constraints so that you can see that a well-connected, well-gridded system does a very fine-grained connection of traffic and keeps it from building too much. So we can now take that to an actual project. In this particular case, the heights where all this was planned out, I think you can see that this is very characteristic of the neighborhood area with the high levels of connectivity that are planned versus right now a very, very broken grid and all the problems or challenges that go with that. Now let's talk about the money and in this case show how we can save a fortune if we start to take a look at how we can better use the system. There's a railroad track that runs here, so this road is having to do all the heavy lifting. By just making a few little connections, all of the traffic that emanates, say, from this area can stay off of the big road where it backs up 6 hours a day for about a mile and a quarter. The reason this particular road is backing up is because of what we call a confluence. This road wants to continue here, and this one obviously here. So for 6 hours a day, because of this confluence, the traffic will back up at a very significant level. The answer would be to spend $60 to $70 million to do a flyover, which would devalue all the land further. So we came in and proposed something different. We make the missing connections, and with the missing connections, we're able to pull together an area that is now easy to get to, distributes the traffic, and eliminates the traffic congestion. That's the power of a network. Now, as we try to make connections, we realize that a lot of people are not speaking the language of the value of the connection. So the day I was here, it was 110 degrees, the hottest day in the history of Seattle. These folks on one side of the barriers were saying to me, if we remove the barriers, you're responsible for the life of my child. We stepped on the other side of the barriers, and there was another crowd waiting for us there. And they said, if you don't remove the barriers, you're responsible for the life of my child. Either way, it wasn't that big of a deal, but to these people, it was a huge deal. But I think the point is that people have become very emotionally attached to whatever condition they have. And some people are really for it and some aren't. And that is a very important reason to bring together so many of you tonight and with the other meetings that will occur, so you can start to learn the language and learn some of the opportunities. In this particular case, the barriers were created because the county would basically put up a barrier anytime anyone wanted it. So it's almost similar, not in number, but certainly in concept. And so now, in order to reduce the amount of time people spend in their car or making trips, we're now looking at how can we make those connections in order to improve all the trip times and the quality of life. We can see, again, the power of the network here, that if we don't have a way through, this is referred to in this area here as a super block. You've got several, certainly with a power plant, the convention center, the water on one side. You've got the effects of super blocks. So when you start to block your grid, you're getting some impacts that most people don't want. Now let's talk about safety. As we make connections, we can see in this case, by going to a number of cities that are well connected and those that aren't, these are the particular cities we studied. And you can see now the effects, those that are well connected, green on the left, those that aren't on the right. When we're looking at low connectivity, we're looking at the patterns, as you can recognize, that are very broken, or working our way up the scale to a nicely connected grid. Here are the results. as we are able to go to a higher density of connections, and you've got a fairly good connection, but not external. You've got good connections internally because of the grid. Notice that we see the node comparisons. The safer cities are the ones that are better connected. The less likelihood that people will speed, and a much greater likelihood people will walk, they'll bike, and their safety will be much better. Today, Virginia is now requiring a certain node to link ratio. That's intersections to street sections ratio. So no developer is allowed to come in without meeting a certain basic requirement for a link to node ratio. The good news is they're improving their fire service response times, delivery times, everything that needs to occur is happening better as they're following this new pattern. So what the planners there are able to do is to show when the plans come in where to put just one or two more links in order to get up to the right ratio. And this is the kind of thing then that helps build that level of connectivity. So why does it matter? The city of Charlotte put a lot of thought and time into figuring out how long it takes for their fire service to get to a call and how many different fire stations they had to have based on the land use pattern. To run a single station with only one piece of equipment, we're talking about roughly $1.5 million a year, or with a little more equipment, somewhere around $2.8 million a year, and this is again for one station. Now, when we go and take a look at the actual costs, because they're fixed, we'll go to the comparison. Number 15 is in a historic, well-gridded, well-connected area, and they're able to cover something like 10 times more rooftops. So think about that. In area number 31, you need basically, to cover the same number of rooftops, 10 fire stations. Now this is absolutely true of fire service, but it's also true of police service. It's true of FedEx deliveries, UPS deliveries, whatever, sanitation units or whatever. So the cost of running government goes way up as we continue to break the grid, but as we start to heal the grid, our cost of governance goes down. Our ability to deliver the services that communities need is now more affordable. I want to just show you a couple of other comparisons so we can talk about tools. Met with the mayor and the city council of Fairhope recently to look at how do we address what they value the most, and I think there are a lot of comparisons here. They want lower speeds on their streets, so we took the concept of taking out the double yellow lines, putting in two broad lines 18 feet apart, and brought the speeds down and brought up a lot of the qualities that people want in their neighborhoods. We mix this in with a lot of programmatic things they're doing, safe routes to school for the children. And again, I'm just sharing with you some of the tools. These are now 8-foot wide lanes. And again, their goal is to get the speeds down and to keep the flow of traffic moving, and doing this at a low cost. So it's really worth going over and seeing for yourselves what they've been able to achieve without spending large money by just using paint. As I toured your neighborhood streets, you have some of the same opportunities that you can get started on some practices by just reapplying paint in different ways. And then, of course, set the stage for additional infill investments to occur to get the densities up. They're now also going to paint their crosswalks much brighter, much wider, and again, help bring down the speeds and so on. So all of these things together give us some tools that I think you can apply to the neighborhood, and in time, throughout other areas of Pensacola, mini circles. You've already got essentially one. I'm not 100% sure to call your treatment a full roundabout or just an elaborate mini circle, but it's good what you've got. It creates an opportunity to bring the speeds down. You can also do what we call a curbless street, and you've got some opportunities for this. We do drainage a little differently. In fact, we can not only gather the water in the valley gutters, which you see out just beyond the car, but we can also, on some street designs, gather the water in the center of the street. Both can be superior treatments. When we talk about street connectivity, there are different levels of connectivity, from allowing fire access in to walking and biking to full access. Another set of tools, just to explain the difference in the two terms. The mini circle is very small. Notice at the top, it's very affordable. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then down at the base is a true roundabout. A true roundabout always has splitter islands. It's a little larger. It needs to be. And so at the gateway or the entrance to many neighborhoods, we're now using roundabouts. But once we're into the interior neighborhood, to keep the speeds low, we use mini circles. And again, to show you the concept of applying the paint, and in this case, Amelia Island, where we're working to bring the speeds down. Notice we try to get rid of the double yellows. You can only do this if the volumes are below a certain level, but I guess it's good fortune that we've way overdone the double yellows, and now there are many streets where we can take them out, get the speeds down, use sharrows to bring the speeds down more, and then use mini circles. They can either be domed, as you see here, or they can be, as we go through this set, start as domed and actually grow into full-size mini circles. Trees are also used for traffic calming. As you can see here, we gang them or bunch them. We were able to dedicate exactly the speed we wanted for this road. We have 7 full roundabouts. Once we put this roundabout in, the crashes went from 7 personal injury crashes every year to none in 16 years. In fact, not even a recorded crash. We can do roundabouts on bigger roads like Bay. This is a road that was carrying 23,000 cars a day, and we took down and really brought it down to 2 lanes. It's quieter. The retail sales along the area jumped over 30%. Here again, you can see it when it was 5 lanes and down to 2 lanes. By using roundabouts, we can move more traffic and quieter and safer. So this is another tool that's been suggested that would greet or embrace the area. Roundabouts can be very attractive. They are meant to be gateways. They're very easy for pedestrians to cross the streets. Same with bicycles. It's all about how we design them. Where the mini circle is smaller, it will fit in almost any intersection you can dream up and keep the speeds low. One wonderful aspect to the mini circle is you no longer are looking all the way down the shotgun barrel to the far end of the street. If you choose to, some mini circles can actually make the street appear that it ends. And you can pick up on any design. The cool thing is it's the neighbors who help design the actual features, the landscaping materials, and so on. Now here's the cool thing. As we bring down the speeds, and just with the appearance of bringing the speeds under control, homes go up in value. These are the modest increases in home value, but we can see even more dramatic rises as well. Again, a mini circle in this case. Seattle now has 1,200, and they have brought down their crashes in the neighborhoods 93%, sustained over 20 years. Another opportunity, and this is one I think you'll want to take a good look at, is how do you not get a significant jump in traffic on government, for example? Well, the most important thing is not to make it a direct visual connection. And so this is an opportunity to do a chicane effect, to have the lateral shift so that the motorists are like looking into a park. This is a project where we had too many lanes and too many people were speeding on the street. So we created this opportunity. You can still enter and you can still exit, but you don't enter at a high speed and you don't exit at a high speed. And this could be the type of a treatment that would work well on a street like Bay. So I'm hopeful that I was able to at least give you a visual picture for the kinds of things that many communities are now doing. especially making good use of green, of trees, of parking, better marked crossings. You have a great opportunity because it's a historic material to even consider pulling off the asphalt and re-exposing the brick. Orlando, just to give you an example, did this on a number of streets. They did some exploration work and found out they have 352 miles of paved over brick. And they made it a really great effort to share with the residents that if they would pay 25%, that the city would pay the other 75%. They later switched that ratio when they realized how much demand there was, and now the residents pay 75%, the city pays 25%, and they still have a 5-year waiting list. Brick and the lower speeds bring up the value of everyone's home, which is obviously a great benefit for anyone who lives on a brick street, but it also brings back that historic quality or feel, and it stabilizes home values and prices. So think about the value of all of these tools we've been looking at. A number of your streets, as I study them, would be ideal candidates for bike lanes, which further brings down the speed of traffic. Think about those kinds of stores that are missing in the neighborhood that you would love to see good access for food, how to tighten down intersections so that people don't drive too fast, or to create just a connecting lane. So my goal was just to give you some visuals to work from as we go forward. This, by the way, is a raised intersection. It's another technique for not only adding color, but to bring down the speeds and to create that social atmosphere. Now, from here on out today, I'd like to turn the lights back on and see if we could record your thoughts. Everything tonight is being carefully videotaped so that this can be shared with people who weren't able to make it here this afternoon, but also to give you some base for going forward. So, Alan, I'd like to just see if we could just ask people to share any thoughts or comments they have so that we get a listing of them. Would that be good?
I think it's a great idea. We've got a microphone. Let me first introduce some of the facilities here. We do have drinks. We have coffee if anyone was succumbed to the darkness of the room. In the back of the room, we've also got water in bottles. We've got a microphone in the middle of the room by the pillar. If anyone's going to make a comment in this section of the meeting, take a moment to go actually to the microphone so we can pick it up on the recording, which we're making for this meeting, but also so that the folks all around the room can hear what you're asking about and hear your comments and concerns. Does that sound good? So if we can do that, we're going to use the microphone up here. Dan and I will have these two microphones. I might steal your video connection so we can use again some of the maps to talk about where we're talking about today, and I think we can go from there. We've obviously got some more. We've got some more visuals we want to use in the back of the room, but for right now, I think we can use our terminal here. So if anyone wants to go first, I know there were some folks that were concerned about time.
This is a great turnout, folks. Yeah.
I'll go first. My name's Chris Rabby. I'm a business owner and building owner on the corner of Florida Blanca and Government Street. That corner that we're dealing with is a very tight corner. There's a building right across the street that's built right abutting the sidewalk. Mine is a sort of Pizza Hut building there on the south, on the southwest corner. Yeah, that's my building there.
Okay.
I have personally seen numerous cars that have been struck there by semis trying to turn that corner, and just in general, it's a fairly dangerous corner for traffic. I'm concerned that the increase in the traffic flow is going to create more accidents and create more situations on that corner right there.
As I look at the illustration, it appears that you could use curb extensions on each of these corners. Every time we have on-set parking, that would allow the driver to pull much further out to see before they make a commitment. This intersection, too, could, it's hard to tell everything from the air, but you may be able to do a nice raised intersection, something that's going to keep the speeds low and bring everyone down to a safe speed for the turn. But the curb extensions are a very powerful tool and add to your retail area because the sidewalk is now much larger.
What about making these connections four-way stops?
We're trying to get away from four-way stops, and let me explain why. They create a lot of noise, and they don't necessarily reduce the crashes. In fact, if it's the wrong location for a four-way stop, they can actually increase the number of crashes. But it's when an engineering analysis is done at any intersection, they'll look at every possible tool. So four-way stops are still a possibility, so that's something that I'm glad you mentioned, so that can be looked at as well.
And if you look at this, the street has widened so much down Government Street that the houses are really right on the sidewalk. There's not a whole lot of expansion except space except into the street. And parking is a premium downtown.
Yeah, you don't want to lose parking.
We can't
By the way, just an important figure to keep in mind, in a well-used district, one parking space is worth $200,000 a year. That's if it's being turned over, that is properly managed. But you don't want to lose parking. If anything, you want to get more parking back.
Right. Those are my concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Those are good.
Thank you.
Okay, the last 2 blocks of Government Street down towards the dead end, from Florida Blanca to 9th, there's no way to use the sidewalks. Have you noticed that?
We noticed it today.
Yeah.
Okay, I live down there, and people, through the festivals and jogging, everyone has to go in the road. Wheelchairs, strollers, and on both sides. And I was just curious, before you open something up, like Government Street, that's something you're wanting to do, right? You're dying to open up Government Street?
That's one of the considerations there.
I mean, all your terminology is that we lost it and it was wrong to close it and everything. So, but before it seems like you need to correct all those other problems first. And I'm concerned that you'll just open it up and just leave it like it is, which is not good and ugly. And the power lines are in the sidewalk. The power poles are right in the middle of the sidewalk. Did you notice that?
And some trees.
And trees.
Yes, and we love the trees. That's my other concern. So that was it.
Well, those are very important concerns, and you do not want to touch Government Street in terms of opening it up unless you're going to take care of really bringing down the speeds and building a different character so anyone who goes down there feels like they're going to a park and treats it with that level of respect. The Europeans have a term for that referred to as a Vornoff, living street. Whatever treatment would occur in these 2 blocks should add to the value of all the properties and the experience and the social life of the street. So I would recommend heartily that needs to be part of the design. Do you want to mention the possibility of what the alignment would be, that it wouldn't be a straight alignment?
I don't know if I have that image through here. I'm going to just check to see if I have the... I have a 2004 plan rendering. You've seen this on the middle image on this side of the room. This is from what was called the Gendros plan, and it was brought in from the CRA in 2004. This is merely a concept. This is not like a lot of folks might think this is like the end result of this meeting. I'm showing you this as a concept. Actually, I think let me pull down the transparency value so we can actually see it. But you can see it overlaid on the district here, and
you see how the road jogs? It no longer goes straight to the intersection.
What we're talking about is right here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe difficult to see. If you can follow my mouse, you can see a movement here in the street that goes from a straight government that we're used to, straight down and accessing Bayfront Parkway. Again, in this rendering, Bayfront Parkway was single lane. This other side of the facility was used for a lot of pedestrian and bicycle facilities. This is a 2-lane facility. In actuality, if you were to turn off this, we see 2 lanes there with a divided median. But the essence of what the Gendros plan essentially showed was access on government coming not amongst the roundabout, but before the roundabout, and giving the vehicle freedom to go east or west on Bayfront Parkway. Again, when Bayfront Parkway was rendered here in this image, it was rendered as a one-way. So I think there's some disconnect, obviously, between this rendering, which is all it is, and some of the realities we see here, but that's the connection there we're talking about.
And I think the other thing worth looking at is we're not talking about a single connection. We're talking about balancing the traffic by having multiple new connections that take heavy traffic off of any one street and give a nice finer grain dispersal of traffic on multiple streets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can see it here. Actually, the image cuts off here, but let me pull the image back, and you can see Florida Blanca here. We recognize Florida. Are we able to see the screen decent? If you can't, you've got the TV there. But if you're not, we might want to pull the lights down just a fraction. But you can see the connections discussed in this Gendros plan are here, here, here before government actually terminates at the end. You can also see a connection insinuated here, but again, the image really stops there. So that might give you an idea of some of the vision that actually was pulled forth from a large community involvement set of meetings that actually occurred back previous to 2004. But this really isn't reality. We've got a different Bayfront Parkway here. Okay, thank you. We have another.
Yeah. Could you please share with all of us at what point in the series of workshops will all of us actually have basically extended drawers, people like you all, experts that are able to take what you're discussing and actually put pencil to paper?
Let me see if I can give this to you guys without any aids here. Today's meeting really is a lead up to a few other meetings. One of the ultimate goals that we've set forth. Dan, I might borrow your microphone.
Yeah.
Back this way. Thank you. One of the goals, if everyone can hear still, one of the goals of this meeting today is to establish the path forward. The path forward is going to involve a great deal of involvement with the folks that I'm hoping will stick around through meetings 2, 3, 4. Those meetings occur all the rest of this month. I'll actually borrow that now. My dates for the meetings are July 12th, July 19th, and July 26th. I don't know the availability of the entirety of the group, but I've put these meetings at a 5:30 start time, not a 2:30 start time. I didn't want to get out of here at 9 o'clock tonight. I knew this was going to be a long one. But those meetings, I want to sort of get down to the brass tacks, the meat of what we find our community vision to be. In other words, we can actually talk about some of the elements of design that we like as a community, and that we can start to sort of, the term is render them. And I think some of the things you saw in Dan's presentation included an actual image of a street, and then some rendering, some look like computer, CGI over top of it. That's the type of rendering we're going to be able to do, and we want to look into that in the next meetings, not really this meeting. I've got a goal at the end of today to sort of establish 3 main sets of our group here today. I'd like to have one group that would just look at design, and this is design of Government Street. This is intersection design. This is also design of the interface between Government Street and Bayfront Parkway and 9th Avenue. That design group, I believe, is going to do some more heavy lifting in the second and third meetings. I've actually set the meeting on July 19th as a design meeting with additional room for special topics. So let's say we didn't get 2 of the other topics I'm going to mention here satisfied, we could bring those topics into that second meeting on July 19th. July 12th is going to be where we premiere all 3 special topics. I've called them special topic task forces. I was without another name for it. Nobody complained at my office. So you guys are going to be jumping into task forces. It sounds exciting, I hope. One task force is obviously design. Another task force is going to be called livability and walkability. This is where we're going to discuss the function of our neighborhood here as far as our pedestrian facility, our bicycle facility, and the other word, livability. Is this a livable facility in the street itself? And then I'm going to have a separate group. All these groups are going to be staffed with planning council staff and with city staff aligning together. The third one is going to be the automobile access. So we're going to be discussing the way the automobile accesses parking, accesses the homes and businesses, because all of those exist on this street, and access the street facility itself. Does that mean Florida Blanca is discussed in that one? Yeah. Does that mean East Government's discussed there? That's correct. Do we discuss the intersection here? Yes, in that one way. Do we discuss it being a one-way facility? Yes. Do we discuss Spring and Balin and how they're interfacing this whole plan and project? The answer is yes. So automobile access as a whole, as it accesses our portion of the community as a whole, that's what we're talking about here for those 3 meetings. And hopefully at the end of this meeting, we kind of can see where our interests lie. We might have a big group in design and a small group in automobile access, but I think the opposite will be the case. And we might have a few people that want to be in livability, walkability, but I'm hoping that we can sort of get an even number. I'm not going to require it, but hopefully an even hashing of the room up into 3 groups. That's sort of the goal at the end of today. So today was a bring you in, throw a bunch of information at you, and I wanted the meetings to follow quickly enough after this meeting so we don't lose the lesson, but also have access to our input at a much higher scale. Again, visioning these things with a tool, with the actual streetscape in front of us, like a picture of our actual street. That's the function of that portion of these meetings. Is that basically what we were talking about here? I've got a couple that are hands up. If we can do the microphone, and I saw your hand up as well. Do you want to go first?
I have one quick question. Nobody's mentioned anything about trucks. Can you talk about trucks just a little bit?
I can talk about trucks and I can talk about fire engines. It should be in the same conversation as transit vehicles. Okay, these vehicles are of larger chassis. The chassis are 35 feet and extend even further. How these vehicles access the street is going to be discussed when we talk about automobile access. Of course, we know that this street used to be a main thoroughfare. Now, I don't know what it was called previous to 1981, but we used to have major transit on East Government going up to 9th. Was it called ECAT? I don't know what the system was called, but we had a transit system at the time, and it was bustling, and it was up and down the street. If there's a connection, I think it's likely to assume that ECAT may have a discussion at some point whether they want to run a route again that direction. If it goes to Gulf Breeze, I don't know. That's really their business. But the transit vehicle should be addressed the same as the truck, should be addressed the same as the fire truck. Is all these facilities we're talking about, traffic mini circles, a roundabout, all those facilities are designed to handle larger chassis vehicles. In fact, you'll see if you saw any of those pictures in your memory, roundabouts have a hard edge, and then they have a decorative facility in the middle. That hard edge is so the tractor trailer's back wheels actually roll across it as the truck takes the normal route. The trailer actually drags inside. So the facilities should not be designed, if we talk about that now, it shouldn't be designed, or any roundabout facility or any access facility shouldn't be designed to exclude, a fire truck or anything like that.
Last week I watched a semi-tractor trailer negotiate around the clock on Romana Street. That was quite an observation.
I wish you had pictures.
Pardon?
I wish you had pictures.
I wish I had my phone with me. He ran up on the sidewalk where people walk. He ran up on the sidewalk because he could not negotiate his turn. So he had to get up on the sidewalk, first on the left side, then on the right side.
Well, he was dumb because he didn't see the dead-end signs.
But once he got committed, he had to go. He had no choice but to go forward.
All right, I had a hand up. Yes, sir. Yes, please. We can all hear you much better if you do.
And it gets recorded.
And it helps the recording as well.
This is a great turnout, folks. Yeah.
You weren't talking about me. My name is Wilmer Mitchell. I'm a property owner on Government Street. Actually, I'm the president of Seville Quarter, and I own Seville Quarter with my family. And that's where my 6 children and I and my wife work. And we have been the owners since 1988. But I have a history going back to the 1967 when my business started, which is way before any of this came up. And the question was raised about the history, and I know you're going to go forward, and I'm very impressed with everything that's been presented about the possibilities and the pros and cons, and I'm hoping that'll all be worked out. But I thought it would be appropriate, because I had a personal involvement in how this has got in the shape it's in to begin with, and I want to get that on the record before we go, wherever we end up going. But I will say I do have 125 employees down there and own property on both sides of government in the 100 block. And I was with the group, there's a lot of them in this room here maybe, that was originally got the whole historic district going. I worked with Bob Snow, I was his lawyer, he was one of the principals involved in it. Where Seville Quarter was nothing but unoccupied buildings except for one on the corner, and now we have a place we're very proud of. And the whole district was a thrill to be involved with because a lot of it was a slum. You couldn't make a mortgage down there because banks wouldn't lend on Seville Square, for instance. But finally they got one in the Door House. A bank said, okay, get us appraisal. Pratt Martin said, who was a great appraiser, he said, I don't know how I can appraise that for worth anything, but I will. And he did, and the bank loaned, and the insurance people got involved, and I personally owned 3 houses north of Seville Square. I was a young, broke lawyer, but I thought, shoot, I'll just get those 3 houses and remodel them and release them and sell them. And everybody got in the spirit, and the place came alive a long time ago, and it's continued. But the question Mr. Snow wanted to know one time, he called me. He built all of this with Businessman of the Year in Pensacola and Orlando and in the state of Florida. And he was very proud of Pensacola and loved it. And he called me and he said, I hear they're closing Government Street. This would have been, I guess, 1980. He said, I hear they're closing Government Street. And I said, well, I heard that too, but I don't know how it got started. Turns out it was in the historic district's Pensacola, what they call it, Historic Pensacola Preservation Board's plan involved. Mr. Moody was the executive director. He wanted to isolate the historic district, and cut it off from the water and cut it off from everything. And he envisioned a lot of pedestrian traffic and ladies pushing baby carriages and a lot of very wonderful, quaint things. But Mr. Snow said, this is a boulevard, this is a wide street, and it's a main street in that part of town. How can they talk about making it a dead end? So I said, well, apparently it's in the plan that's been approved for the Bayfront Parkway. And this is to be closed. And he said, you're my lawyer, what can you do about it? And I said, well, I'll try. So we went out into the community, and I got, personally, the mention of some petitions that are circulating now. I obtained a petition signed by every owner except the municipality, which owned 2 parks, from Palafox Street to 9th Avenue. Everybody signed opposing the closing of the street. It wasn't closed yet, but it was in the plan. Opposing. I had a map reminiscent of that plat map over there, and I put it blue, colored in blue, everybody. Not just on Government Street both sides, but 1 block each way. I don't think a soul that was available to sign a pro or con. There wasn't anything but blue on my map. And I went down to a meeting called for the purpose of the Historic Preservation Board. And there we proposed that they not close the street, that they change their mind. They had supported their executive director's idea. They had to take we talked about it in an hour. They took it in the executive session, meaning they went with a lawyer and talked about what they should do. They came back and they unanimously voted not to close that street. I took my petition to the City Council of Pensacola, who had approved what the historic people had done and before. And now I said, well, they don't approve it anymore. They voted unanimously. And the City Council voted 9-1. Jim Reeves, I don't know why, he was for keeping it open, voted not to close, don't close that street. So I called Bob and I said, well, looks like we won. Well, it didn't work out that way because they had to get the approval of the state, which was forthcoming, but it took time. And then they had to get the approval of the federal government up in some complicated part of the federal government because there were some of the funds involved. And what actually happened to close that street, which everybody by that point had said is a very bad idea, not that the traffic doesn't need to be controlled and there can't be improvements and all of that, but to close, I mean, at the time, there was no way to get in the historic district under his plan. He would close Florida Blanca, Government Street, and Alkanee Street. And we made the point, Well, do you understand? That means if you're coming from the east, you must enter the historic district from Railroad Street, Tarragona, north and south. Isn't that the ugliest possible entrance you could find to the historic district? And they said, okay, we're voting for you. So the Federals, their approval didn't come back. And one Sunday, a contractor who had the contract to build the extension of 9th Avenue, he said, I don't know what y'all got, but I got a contract that I got to build this street, 9th Avenue, and it was, he expanded it down there, and he took a bulldozer and bulled up the dirt that high and closed the street. And we need to look carefully as to whether that was, as Mr. Gindros said, and as we said, and Bob Snow said, it was a bad idea then, it's a bad idea now. So I look forward to coming to some of the other meetings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just give us your name and then speak into the microphone.
Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I'm opposed to opening the 9th Avenue to the Government Street, but we got all kinds of work to do here. We got 3 more sessions, and I would like to suggest that we keep our mind on the walkability of the community rather than the traffic through. And I'm certainly glad that we have one of the world's experts here today, Mr. Burden, and his expertise, I found out, is concerned with walkability, and that's our main issue here to improve, or we don't want to disprove the walkability of this particular area in time. So I want to ask Mr. Burden one question, but first, this whole meeting, and actually it could be academic because there's business pending before the City Council who has authority. We don't have any authority. The Planning Committee doesn't have it. There's a business for the City Council. They could, next meeting, just pass it without any input, but I don't believe they will. But I would like to have some input at some other meeting as to what the city is doing about this motion to open it. That's still pending and still can be voted on by the city without everyone's input. Now, I'd like to ask Mr. Burden, would the improvability of this area, I'm talking now about where 9th Street would communicate with Government Street, would open it improve the traffic, or would it improve the walkability? And I don't think it would improve the walkability. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Yes, and I think the best way to answer the question is when we can start to distribute the traffic in a more even and refined level, walkability goes up. And it goes up for several reasons. First of all, when people walk, they don't want to walk on a street where there's no traffic. It just simply, they want some observation. But they also want enough connectivity and enough of the treatments that we were talking about and showing that we keep the speeds low. So by having a finer grained system working, that is more connections, walkability goes up. Everywhere we've done it.
Would you say the walkability would be improved instead of traffic flow if this is opened up in any way? And I would think after some decision made, if it is open and a manner of opening is approved, that you give us some opinion on that. But at our meeting, that middle plan over there with the cul-de-sac, I think was completely rejected by the City Council out of hand because the cul-de-sac would be into the state's domain. The state doesn't want it. The city can't afford it. So I think we could summarily reject that center.
I just wanted to recap for the record. You've asked if improved automobile access would improve walkability, was the first part of your question, and then you made a comment about the Gendros plan image on the middle image over there was a rejected image by the city council, you believe, because of some associations with a federal or a state DOT? Was that the general issues? We're just doing this for the microphone, I'm sorry. Does that sound right, sir?
I looked at that plan, rejected, because they'd have to buy a lot of additional ground, and not only that, they would have to fill in one of the bays.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think we've talked about earlier, I don't think I went into every detail, but we talked about the disparity between what was imaged there for the Gendros plan and what is in actuality now as Bayfront Parkway's facility is complete. You can see there's a great deal of differences between the two. So I think we could just agree. In reality, we don't even have to suppose something. Reality is there's a great deal of difference. There's a gap between what was planned in '04 and what's the reality today, sir. But your original question of Dan, I believe, was association between automobile access and walkability. So there you go.
Right. As we improve automobile access and make a finer grain distribution of traffic, we're improving conditions for walking. So we're both improving the ability for motorists to go places and access the things they wish, but by controlling their speed and giving more choices, we're making the overall neighborhood more walkable. And everywhere we've added back the missing pieces, we see more walking occur as a result. That it's a better balance.
So the parameter of walkability should be given weight over traffic flow in this particular area.
Well, in this area, the priority should go first to walking, add in bicycling, and the social life of the street, and still handle the traffic. So walkability is exactly what the district is really all about.
I think if you look at the tenets of complete streets, you see that walkability and bicycle accesses are addressed first, because those are often the facilities that are lacking in most of our automobile-centric designs for streets. So often you'll hear a complete street described as a street that handles pedestrian, bicycle, transit, and automobile access. And they handle them all at the same time. So a facility that does all of those is essentially what a complete street, the idea of a complete street is. So you still have the term automobile in there, but usually it's pushed to the end because it's always been historically pushed to the front. So you see the idea? That it's still there. That includes your truck access, but
Diane Mack, gentlemen. We've heard a great deal of interesting principles, tenets about communities, but I would ask you in writing to apply that to this particular issue, this particular, the issue before us. It has been now, and I don't live there, but I'm a former councilwoman. I care very much about this community. I have friends who live there who care very much about what is proposed. It has been 30-some years now since this, what some consider mistake was made. And so in that time, you have people who have adopted that neighborhood, who live there, who love it, some who have their offices there. So here's the question I would ask you. What is broke? Okay? Not philosophically, not what happens in North Carolina or California or in generalities, but what is broke? And I'm not asking for an answer today, but I think that on both sides of the issue that this community deserves to have a pro and a con. What's the good? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages of both, keeping it closed, opening it up? I think we need to see current traffic counts, projected traffic counts if it's open. We need some quantifiable things. We need the pros and cons. We need to know, if somebody thinks it's broke, why? Okay, thank you.
Yep, I thank you very much, and I think that's some questions that we would like to take to the local, some of our staff here with the City of Pensacola as well. So that's a very good question. And it's something I think we need to definitely tackle in our upcoming meetings. So please look forward to the information there.
Hi, Oscar Hernandez. My wife and I live at 214 Cevallos, and I kind of two things. One, I followed the former councilwoman's, statement that if it's been there And I think it should be the burden on those that want to change to come forward and show what is the reason for the change. We're speaking here as conclusory. We are now looking for ways of, expanding the sidewalk so the truck can go in and da-da-da. No, I mean, you're presuming that this thing is going to get done. You want to change. Why do you want it changed? I mean, why is it we talk about livability and the change of the streets? If you're going to change something to reflect the necessity of the change, the necessity has to come first. Where is the groundswell of the people in the neighborhood saying, listen, we are in need of a connect on government tonight, so please do something about it? I don't see anybody moving for that, and if it is, please put it out there so that we could all see it. Your thing about the accessibility and connectivity of streets, improving walking, that's assuming that you have a high volume of traffic, as the lady was saying. We got a street that has no traffic. I would venture to say, and I respect your experience, that increasing vehicular traffic does not improve walking traffic. Now, if you got something to the contrary of that, where you had a dead-end street with no traffic, and you increase the traffic tenfold, and that's safer, please, I want to read that. You're talking about accidents. The gentleman always, well, you know what, we're going to widen the street so we now got more frontage. What? What is the need for us to connect the two streets? What is the necessity? What is it going to cost? Does the necessity outweigh the risks? You know what? Life is great, but we don't live in Wisconsin. We don't live in Portland. We live in Pensacola. It's been a dead street for 30 years. Why do we need to open it today? If you say connectivity, let's open all of them up. So why are we now focusing on on government and Ninth? Let's go on right down the line. If it's going to improve, we don't want to be the only recipients of the improvement. We want to share it with all Pensacola.
I love your approach.
My approach is called common sense.
Yeah.
And common sense says to me, listen, you got a dead-end street with 3 cars that go by. And usually they're like tourists because they don't know it's a dead end. Yeah. So now you're going to say, we're going to open it up, and that is going to improve walkability, as the gentleman in the front was saying. What, increasing traffic? Who's going to run? No. Anyway, that was my only comment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me start. I'm sure we need the local perspective, but I think the important thing is we now need the data. The purpose of the meeting tonight is to find out what kind of information do we need in order to analyze. As we learn this, then for the second meeting, we'll be able to report back to you after the analysis has been done. You'll know much more about cost. You'll know more about what it will do in a positive sense and what some of the other effects will be as well. So this is why we're having the work session, is to gain your ideas, and you're asking the right questions.
Well, let me ask you another one. Why is it that we talk in terms of this is the proposal that we have, and yet you're telling me that we're going to go into the data gathering and then we're going to make a decision? No. We're talking about workshops of how we're going to make it workable. Those presume that this thing is going to happen, that it's a done deal. No. If it's a done deal, then don't waste our time. Let's go home as the other gentleman here that left, I think. If you're going to have everybody oppose it, but it's going to go through anyway, hey, let's call it a day, and that's the way it is.
Well, let me stop you there and just tell you what the reality is. The reality is the city has tasked your regional planning council in your district of Florida to do public involvement to find out what your vision for this neighborhood and for this this portion of the town is. They're backing that action up with money. They're paying us to do this. So right now, actions are what I'm going to present to you right now. The city is asking us to ask you. The city's putting forth this meeting so that we can ask and get as much input out of this group as possible. That's what we're here for. So I can't presume anymore other than what I have seen in action for me, and that is that the city is actively, with their mouths in their, I guess, the city coffers, asking you about your community.
Good. And I'm going to respond to this and get the heck out of the way. That's fine. So why are we talking about connecting government tonight? If this is some general, discussion that we're going to have about improvements in general. No. This is about connecting government tonight. So whether we're getting federal money or whatever, it doesn't make any difference. I mean, this is about one specific thing This is not just saying to the community, we've got money that we want to put into the community for improvement. Give us some input in what you think needs to be improved. No, this is about opening ninth in government. There is an agenda. There is a particular specific project that no longer becomes a general for the good and the benefit of all. So anyway, thank you.
Okay, I'll guess we'll just go to another question. I think we addressed it. The agenda is to ask for your input specifically. And let's go to another, anyone that wants to come to the microphone.
Yes, thank you. My name is Sherry Myers, and I'm not here to weigh in on whether or not to open or not open Government Street. I will say that the City Council felt like there should be a lot of citizen input into this issue. So I'm happy that the mayor's office went back and contacted the West Florida Regional Planning Council and asked that you come in here and do this, because this is what we want to see before this issue comes back to the City Council. And thank you, Councilman Spencer. I'm sure you had something to do with facilitating this opportunity. But I'm not here to, I'm here to speak about what I know for a fact is broken. I am very familiar with the streets in downtown Pensacola and have been for a long time. Before I became a member of the City Council, I was down at City Council many, many times talking about what is broken with these downtown streets. And I work for the Center for Independent Living Disability Resource Center. And my specialty is the ADA, the Florida Highway Administration Codes on Accessible Sidewalks, the Florida Building Code Chapter 11. And my job is to survey facilities and advocate for the removal of architectural barriers to people with disabilities. So one of my projects has been this downtown area for a long time. 7 years ago, I started working on the parking at Evenings in Old Seville. There was no handicap parking adequate for that event, other than the handicap parking provided by the Kerrigan law firm, who volunteered to use their facility for handicap parking. But that was not sufficient. So I met with the city, and we decided that we would require special events to park at Bartram Park, to set that aside for handicap parking for special events. The problem was there was no way to get across the sidewalk. There were no sidewalks, no curb cuts, and no access aisles going across the street that would allow people to go across the street safely. So we had the parking spot over at the Bartram Park, but no access to get across the street. So if you go over there tomorrow or tonight, you will see that the city did a beautiful job of putting in sidewalks and curb cuts that now connect Bartram Park with Fountain Park and Seville Square. So what you've done by making it universally designed and safe to use for all people, now the street is not only accessible for people with disabilities, it is safe for everybody. So I really like to talk about universal design. Now, what's broken here, what's really, really broken in this downtown area, almost none of the curb cuts, if there are any, comply with the Florida Building Code and federal standards. We have curb cuts that are actually new. One over on Romana Street between Palafox and Balin that is horrendous. It should be taken out. It is a horrendous danger to any pedestrian walking on that street. And that's a new curb cut the city put in.
Which address? Which intersection?
Romana Street.
And?
Between Palafox and Balin.
Okay.
Diane Mack, do you remember the night we walked from the Sanger Theater? Wasn't it on Romana Street that we encountered this grave danger to the public? And that's supposed to be a curb cut. It's in violation of the ADA accessibility guidelines, the Federal Highway Administration guidelines, and the Florida Building Code. Now, we filed, the Center for Independence Living filed a complaint with the Advocacy Center for Persons with Disabilities in Tallahassee over the violations of the sidewalks, the missing sidewalks, the out-of-compliant curb cuts. And the city promised to address those issues 7 years ago in order to avoid a lawsuit. The only thing the city has really fixed is the Bartram Park and the Fountain Park connection. So when we talk about walkability, we have got to address this issue of sidewalk repairs and bringing these curb cuts into compliance with the law. So I want that issue to be addressed and to come out of this workshop with a proposal. There's already been a survey of the sidewalk conditions in the CRA district. That was done about 4 years ago. Ryan, I don't know if she's here or not, but she recently gave me a copy of all of that work that she worked on. But the city has not come up with a plan to address these issues. Even if we opened up Government Street, you can't walk down it.
So, Sherry, what I'm hearing you say is we not only need to make sure we're adhering to the most modern and correct standards, we probably want to start setting some priorities for which streets are going to be most critical so that that master plan meets the needs of the greatest number of people.
That's correct. We want accessibility is the key, universal design,
right,
and meeting the standards we're required to meet by the law.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Just name and then speak clearly into the microphone.
Name's Joe Bernard. I'm a resident on Intendencia Street. Following up on what this gentleman said, we did provide the city council, I think we had 72 names of property owners in Seville that were totally against opening up government.
The petition, I believe it was a petition.
Yes, it was.
Was it submitted?
It was submitted to the city council.
I think I received a copy of this. Okay.
Our concern is dumping traffic from 9th Avenue into Government Street. And that is the concern.
Okay. Yes, sir. I have a copy. Thank you so much.
My name is Bob Kerrigan. We are, and my law partners own a substantial portion of this property down there. Going up 9th Avenue, North 9th Avenue to the cut in there that goes to the some kind of a utility station behind there. And then we own the corner of Government and 9th. We own the south and north part of Government and 9th. And then we own property that is to the west of that. So we own a big section of that corner. I can thoroughly understand people who have enjoyed the peace and quiet of a dead-end street, and I don't blame them. I didn't sign this petition, by the way, they're referring to. But I see, we've been down there since 1971. We've restored a number of properties in that area, and we have substantial investments in the area. So I think, somebody could say, well, you have an economic interest, and I'm sure that's probably true. But I have seen over the years that my particular office, we have two offices, is right there on that corner. It's the blue building that faces the water.
I'm right here.
And so we see semis come down. They can't turn around. The mayor was out riding his bike one day, and I ran out there to talk to him for a second, and some guy comes down and drives over the curb for a long time, and I admit it was me too. We drove over that curb because it was ridiculous to block that street from getting out of the place. So we see that all the time. And it's good to have people here who have an interest in the outcome of this. But I think the process here is really good. That is, you're going to hear, I think, a couple of comments about the sidewalks and things. These are really good comments, some I hadn't even thought about. But as you go on to try to figure out what to do. But I just hope you'll think about the 49,875 people who aren't here, that come downtown a couple of times a year, 3 times a year. They bring their families. We see them parking all over the place with their buggies going to the festivals and things like that. And then they're jammed up and they can't get out of that street, and it doesn't make any sense to anybody. If you think about it, how many government streets in the country are barricaded? There's something missing here, okay? And those white, whatever those things are, it's just truly embarrassing. But for Al Garza, whoever decided to do it, didn't have any choice. I mean, if you don't put them up, people are going to drive over that curve. So when they said there's nothing wrong, I think there is something wrong. We've blocked access to our historic district. Again, if I had a private residence there, if I was renting, I would not be all that wild about more traffic coming in. But all the things that you've pointed out here, which a lot of them I've never heard of before, I thought it was just fascinating, the way we can control traffic, and in all of these places that we've created these cul-de-sacs and blocking the movement of people and vehicles, I'm convinced it's not good for the long-term interest of the city. And we'll cooperate in whatever the final plan is. If the final plan is to keep it closed, you want to build a brick wall down there, whatever you decide to do that makes it better, we're on board. And we have no other interest in the outcome of this other than that. Okay?
Great. Appreciate your input. And let me also broaden this to, as we are able to make appropriate shifts with this particular neighborhood sector, this district, then we're going to learn a lot of things that can be applied throughout the entire downtown. The grid's been broken in many places, and the gentleman who spoke to this is correct. You start one place, but you take a look methodically. Why did we end up with all the one-ways? Why did we end up with these street patterns? We did it because we were focused on getting people home to the suburbs. We now realize we now have a destination, and a destination that needs to have good access and so on. And again, the input this evening is going to be very valuable as we now figure out what kind of data to collect, how to analyze, and then to be able to come back to you with some very meaningful thought about what your choices are and how you might want to go forward.
Just wanted to point out, Mr. Kerrigan mentioned folks jumping the curb. Take a look at this right here. This is an image of the parking lot of Overgroup's parking lot. You can see this rectangle here is Overgroup's parking lot. Look what's happened to the grass right here. Does anyone know what's caused that? I would imagine those are people just frustrated with this dead end and are becoming creative with their driving of their vehicles. But you can see people are choosing to come off of 9th and get onto a building that's just right there. They can see it, but they can't get to it. And I can see that they can see 9th here coming from East Government and are choosing to right across the lawn just to get to 9th Avenue. And I know for a fact people go across this right here because you can see there's tire marks.
The majority of those people are employees that work at that call.
I know exactly how it started. They blocked that because I walk there all the time. I live right there, and that used to not be there. And then they blocked that to do the park, and they had to stop to put. They had to block 9th Avenue. So the people in Overgroup, that building, made that path. All of a sudden, it was just there one day. For years and years, it wasn't there, and so we're talking
but we as transportation planners look at those indicators. When someone's actually going across a different piece of land, we've actually got one. I think you can see it here. This is actually the term I'm going to use right now, and I think it was used in an article. That's a goat path right there. We call it a goat path in transport. If we can get the lights down just 1 second in this portion of the room, you can see 2 goat paths in here. Just hang on with me 1 second. I'll get you right there. A game trail, goat path, whatever. If you look right here where my mouse is, that beaten out path of the grass is because of pedestrians choosing to take their child's walker and cross the grass so often that they actually kill the grass in there. There's one more right here. People are actually choosing to go across in between the bollards. They're called bollards, by the way. In between the concrete, plastic-covered bollards to go to this brand-new facility here of Admiral Mason Park. But then the most significant one, which is the one that we're talking about right now, which is automobile access, there's an set of automobiles. I don't know whether, it doesn't matter that they're just for this building faces East Government, and they're choosing to cross the grass to access it. So those choices are highlighters to folks that are in the transportation planning world, where we try to look at people making choices that are often not provided to them by a sidewalk facility or a road facility. Those are just interesting points that I wanted to show to the group here today. Lights up, and we've got a guy with a comment.
Hey.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, I appreciate you having this. This is really, really important. My name is Chuck Presti, and I'm a property owner downtown. And so, in fact, I saw my house up there, one of your shots.
I won't point it out.
Yeah, don't point it out. Yeah, but the history is real interesting because of how this came to be. The importance of the multi-use for the downtown. The streets, the bicycle, the access, really important too. And so I think that having the input from the community is very vital in this. One of the reasons I think this even came to be was because a proposal was submitted several weeks ago, and then ultimately a petition signed, and I'm guilty. I'm on that petition, and so I want to know a couple of things. One is clarification of that proposal. What's going to happen to that proposal? The original, opening up Government Street proposal design. I don't know where that is. Is that something that is on the shelf? Is that something?
This is not the plan.
Do you all know what I'm talking
about? Your question was
about?
about the proposal that was presented to the council, the committee of the whole in this room on March 19th?
Something
okay.
like that. Was that when it was?
I can. Okay. Is that right? Okay, I can let.
I don't know what's going on with that.
I can let Councilman Spencer reflect what happened to that motion, or I think what happened to that motion is it's in the video or the archive of that meeting. But if Mr. Spencer, you want to take it, I can get you this. Just speak into here.
Sure, and I want to make sure with fellow Councilwoman Myers here, this is, I think, appropriate. I can have this sort of discussion. You know what? I would invite Mr. Garza to comment on this as you recognize where we are in the process. I can certainly do it, but hey, also, now I see I had Lois Benson pointing. We have another council person here, Councilwoman Pratt. Okay. But at that committee of the whole meeting, that motion that I made was to send this recommendation and the engineered drawing as submitted back to basically staff and invite the administration to consider putting together meetings for public that would involve public input, and that's where we are today. So, Mr. Garza.
Councilman Spencer, I agree. There was a proposal to make a simple right-in, right-out connection at the east end of Government Street to 9th Avenue. Staff had taken quotes on that project. It was presented to council. Council realized that there had not been sufficient public input and directed staff to take it back and go through this process on a more extensive level to better define the issues and review the alternatives and other possibilities that may exist. As far as the current proposal, it's going nowhere right now.
Okay. Well, that's a relief. And And I think I probably speak for a lot of people here. I think that was a little bit of tension, and it was not really clarified when we first stepped in, was what was going on with that original proposal. Because personally, I mentioned I signed the petition, but I agree with just about everything Mr. Burton had to say about the importance of accessibility. And I think our city is going to be a lot more progressive if we have appropriate access, and it is closed off. I think we're going to get more tourists that are going to not get lost. They're going to understand where to go. We want to connect the whole downtown for many reasons. So I'm good with that, but it needs to be done smart. And I wasn't happy with that design as a layperson. I didn't think it was a smart design, and I never got the input of why that design, and what about the concerns that Kim made about there's no sidewalks there already for people, so you're going to open that up and people are going to walk on the streets with the automobiles. So I'm interested in opening it up, but I really want it to be done right. So
You sound like a fantastic candidate for Livability Walkability Committee. Later on, we'll figure that out.
You may get drafted.
I think you just did. We have another comment.
Yeah, Freddie Donovan. I live downtown in a van down by the river.
I don't think so.
Let me just ask you this. You mentioned the north-south access down Palafox as being a walkable corridor. What is the east-west walkable corridor in Pensacola as you see it? You're the expert in your tour of our city.
Well, keeping in mind I've only been here for a few hours. It's been years since I've been here before.
You were here in '67. I mean,
yes, I knew the area back before all the broken connectivity occurred. Government Street really is a very, very prominent and a very important connection. The good news is it's not the only one. When people walk, they want a whole series of different options and opportunities. And I believe Church Street goes through. Am I right about that? It does not go through? Okay. But as I look at the grid, it looks like there are other streets that will connect on down to Palafox. But I think the important thing is there needs to be a prominent street where we can put high emphasis on accessibility, universal design, nice vertical walls of trees, all the things that would make it the ideal connector. We call that the A street. And then we would have a series of other streets that still connect so that people have choices. They can take different routes so that there's always a variety and so on.
What sorts of things would you be looking for to maximize commercial impact with the selection of an east-west walkable corridor? And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, low speeds for sure, and the ability to have a lot of on-street parking, and then to really have really nicely designed corners and other treatments that really make it read as the prominent street.
Okay, but would the low investment option involve any sort of existing facilities or existing parcels that are at least amicable to developing commercial type properties? I mean, would we want to do it on a corridor that doesn't have any existing character, for instance? In other words, isn't it more cost effective to pick one of our downtown streets that does have some existing potential? And I don't mean that to promote any street over another, but we've needed an east-west pedestrian corridor. I think we agree with that. Somebody said, what's the problem? Well, the problem is that's what people expect from a progressive city nowadays, A, and B, from an economic development standpoint, having a walkable community is a paramount concern. You mentioned Savannah, Georgia. Savannah is time after time whooping Pensacola in the economic development market. They're attracting the jobs. We compete and we lose. So we don't have the walkable community. We don't have an east-west corridor developed for pedestrian traffic. Okay? So the question is which one do we develop and why?
Do you mind if I take some time to study that for you? Because it's easy enough for me to walk a few streets and to study it on the map. But definitely you want the directness. You also want there to be decent housing stock where the homes are well behaved, they're holding the street nicely, that you've got all the other architectural legacy buildings and so on that you want. So for its directness, I would say Government Street it goes all the way to the park with a broken connection. It should, and it connects all the way down to Palafox. And
Beyond.
as I've walked up and down it, to me as a pedestrian, it reads very, very well. Just needs some tender, loving care. Yeah, but let me take some time and find a. Okay, understood. Thank you. It's a good question.
We have more.
Hi, my name is Barbara Albrecht, and I moved here in '83, and I'd like to tell you that at one time we had Palafox was a two-way street, then it became a one-way street, and now it's a two-way street. So that said, just get it on the record. As we make our walkable communities, I know the focus right now is downtown, and it's beautiful what we're doing to it, but let's keep in mind that 9th Avenue goes north, and as it goes north, as you start getting into some of the hilly terrain north of Cervantes, you'll find that we have pig trails, which are what you're calling goat trails.
Interchangeable, hopefully.
Right. Along the road in very busy areas where people have no sidewalks. So, I mean, connectivity is very important, but yeah, go ahead and go up to where the garden center is in that vicinity, and then also go to Davis Highway, which is a very busy area, and you can go from Fairfield up to Davis, and Fairfield up to Brent, and you'll notice that there's a lot of pig trails there as well. So while you're focusing on making downtown more beautiful, we need to focus on these busy other corridors too. And then lastly, as we plant these beautiful trees, these live oaks and these wind-resistant native species, we need to be cognizant about where we send our big vehicles. I personally live in East Hill, and there's nothing more painful than to watch these majestic oaks lose limbs because no one bothered to put a sign saying that there are low-hanging limbs. So we need to be a little more careful with our planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 1 second. One more.
I'm Karen Tessier, and I'm a new resident on Zaragoza, and I'm fascinated, and I don't have an opinion about Government Street being opened or closed yet. I rather view this as an extraordinary opportunity with a lot of issues surfacing here having to do with livability that need to be addressed before any design really takes shape. I would say to you that like Savannah, like Charleston, many other cities in the southeast, not many, Pensacola has the extraordinary gift of an indigenous neighborhood that is really the signature of this city. And I think you have to look at it as a whole, and that would include 9th Avenue, and that would include Bayfront, include Palafox. You have to look at that connectivity with the environmental, the ADA, the pedestrian, the cycling, all of that together, because right now getting across to the sidewalk along the bay, such as you would do along the Battery in Charleston, that intersection right there is crazy. Excuse me.
Yeah.
But I think you have a grand and glorious opportunity to take into account what everybody is saying here and focus on what makes this unique. Because I believe in terms of tourist destinations and livability, this is the epicenter for Pensacola. This is the thing that should be on the postcards and have the buggies and the horses if it were cooler. But this is an extraordinary gift in this community, so we need to make the most of it together.
Great
Thank you very
comments.
much.
And truly, this really is the jewel that, as many times as I come back to Pensacola, it's the area I want to make sure I always make it back to, and it just needs a little bit of polish.
Hello, my name is May Stinson. I'm an owner on East Government. I have two things. One is we've been talking about walkability and what I would view as the historic district grid of streets. And I'm just curious if there is some spillover intent for walkability on Bayfront, as this rejected plan heavily suggested. I'm just curious if we're limiting ourselves to the historic district grid, or if walkability on Bayfront is also an issue.
I don't think there's any reason for us to say that we're going to limit anything that we discuss here to just this district. I think these ideas will need to be, discussed further as we get into further projects out into the city. Obviously, there's other portions of the city that are changing right now. Spring and Balin are in a completely different piece of the grid, but they're being addressed right now by the city. So I think the city's taking a look at the historic district itself. I think the city's taking a look at the downtown itself. And right now, we've just happened to find a group that are specific to East Government, that are taking a look at East Government itself. So this is by design. Again, we invited you here as this group to discuss this portion of these facilities so that we could get a focus, but there's no reason why this pattern couldn't exist outside of this area. There really isn't a good reason.
My second thing is, in particular in the cul-de-sac area of East Government, the road is quite narrow, and these concepts which you described seem to imply a need to widen the road, or there is the sidewalks in the poor condition that they are already quite narrow, and the houses run right up to the sidewalk. So it's not clear to me how you can make Government Street traffic calmed or anything, especially if you have to improve the sidewalks, which would make them wider and encroach on property lines, I think, to do it at all.
Give me one second. I've got an idea. Let me see if this works.
Let me assure you that my view of the government and all of the streets is that you don't need any widening. In fact, you need visual tightening to help.
It seems to already have less than 8 foot wide 2-lane. It just doesn't seem.
No, they're wider. They're so
wider?
much wider.
They're very wide.
In fact, I think you've got you can measure them with your Google.
Not in Street View, but I can when I come out. Let me just pause for a second. I've got a couple.
But there wouldn't be room for diagonal parking there, would there?
What we're talking about, you've seen a bunch of different images from different communities, but I think you also saw some. Darn it, losing my mouse.
Your lanes are actually very wide right now.
This is, well, if I can measure, let me pop out.
Pop out to the,
And I'm going to use the measure tool. I believe what I've got in this section of Government Street is 54 feet of total right-of-way. I'm in centimeters. One moment.
Go to feet.
Okay. I've got, I've got roughly, I think 54 as we were looking at some cross-sections of the street of right-of-way. So if I go from, actually, I've messed up. If I go from this edge of the facility, which is the beginning of the right-of-way, hang on a second.
How about curb to curb?
This is government and, that's too many questions at once. Let me do the measure tool first, and I'll show you what I was talking about. From the building here to the building here, we've got 54.96 on Google. That's roughly accurate to what we have for cross-sections of the street.
Curb to curb?
Curb to, this is actually, this is the amount of right-of-way. This is not curb to curb. This is the back of the sidewalk to the back of the sidewalk, which is what exists for the right-of-way of this street. We are at Government and Savalos. So right now, I think the 54 feet of right-of-way exists through much of this portion of Government Street. And in fact, if you look back at the some of the ideas that were developed in the Gendros plan, they talked about a significant, the term is road diet, and that basically means, let's say an 18-foot lane becomes a 14-foot lane. And when that's addressed and the lanes are actually there's a diet on those lanes, you develop all kinds of space which you can put in a bicycle facility, parking diagonal facility, much larger sidewalk facilities. Those possibilities are all there. Once you take something like this facility, let me try my experiment again. Once you take something like this and look at what you can do with the 54 feet, which is from my arrow to this side of the arrow, which is 54 feet. You just use it differently. Again, Dan was talking about just changing the paint. There's a lot of things a city government can do just changing the paint, and that means this border here for the parking, the parallel parking, which is a pretty wide, broad parallel, this center stripe and this parallel right here, which designates what you do with that road. You can change the paint and find yourself with a whole different scenario. That's one of the effective tools, and it's not a very high dollar tool. I'm just saying I mean, that's one option for this facility.
Do we also know if there's the possibility that there's brick underneath the government? Brick?
Al?
Not
No?
likely.
Okay. What else could be under there? Is there any rail?
Wood pavers. Holy cow.
Wow.
That's a opportunity.
Is there any?
No?
Is there any former? Is
What
there
were
any
they?
former light rail? Does anyone know that?
Okay.
Okay.
Nothing underneath.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
There's a trolley track.
Into the trolley track.
So there's light rail track underneath this facility somewhere.
But there's a lot that you can do with government. If you just looking at this visually, you could do tree wells, you could do treatments at intersections. There's just a lot that would allow you to treat the road visually quite differently and vastly increase the walkability. So you have choices. Yeah.
Thanks. I have a few questions and comments. Number one, Dan, you've already shared with all of us that Pensacola is near and dear to your heart as one of the maybe first freshman classes, a member of the freshman class at the university. So although your schedule is incredibly hectic and impressive, how will you be able to stay engaged with this particular project?
We already have one of the 2 dates reserved on my calendar. So if there's a desire to have me come back, I can come back on one of the 2 dates. And I can be involved with a Skype video conference with an audience. So even if I can't physically be here, I can still be engaged and be able to be interactive with the audience.
All right. I invite you to stay as engaged as you possibly can. And
I would love to.
Of course, I know there's a financial limitation, but I'm asking you to perhaps even think beyond that because of your adopted city. Secondly, I stated in the March 19th Committee of the Whole meeting that while it was certainly a meeting marked by a tremendous amount of opposition at the time to the proposal of the reopening, I tried to find and actually articulate the silver lining, and that was the number of people, although they had that number of people certainly showed up, the majority of them, if not 99%, as the signers of the petition. But my parting comment was, boy, this is great to see this level of passion about anything in Pensacola. I know that former Councilwoman Diane Mack would love to see this level of passion regarding the budget. I don't know how you can do that, Diane, but so I do want to remind everyone that that level of passion that was displayed was really the springboard for today's meeting. And what I hope is that everyone here recognizes that the East Government Street, South 9th Avenue connection has served as, again, a springboard, and it's an invitation for all of us to stay completely involved in this process beyond the East Government Corridor, because every one of the issues that has come up today are really pertinent regarding the livability, the accessibility, the mobility, as Councilwoman Meyer said, the universal design that must begin to be applied and overlaid not only in the Seville district, downtown, but the entire city. So every one of us should come out of this series of meetings better educated and better enlightened about what makes our city more attractive to all sorts of walks of life. Finally, I just want to ask or invite all of you, start looking at East Government Street in terms of the proportions, the dimensions that are being described. You'll begin to understand that actually we have inherited a street that at one time was the east-west boulevard that had to accommodate a tremendous volume of traffic. And because of that, that curb-to-curb dimension is unusually wide for now what is a historic district street. And that unusual width, it's sort of caught in this no man's land between not wide enough to be a highway, but too wide to be sort of an intimate neighborhood street. So what we have really, it's a luxury, because instead of having wearing a suit that's too tight, we've got a street that's too wide. And if you measure those parallel parking widths, they completely, just because of the paint stripe, they are almost 2 feet wider, at least 18 inches wider than any on-street parallel parking space. In addition to that, the lane width is almost 3 feet wider per lane. We have a tremendous opportunity for wide promenades and to introduce tree canopy for the pedestrian to enjoy a shaded walking experience. And I'm just really encouraged that what was introduced as an issue that generated a lot of excitement and a lot of opposition, that I feel that we're at the threshold of a much more meaningful discussion about streets and the quality of living in Pensacola. So thank you very much. And I want to encourage everyone to introduce themselves, or let Carter please talk a little bit about what he's got in the back of the room. Carter Keene, a fellow architect. I don't want to divert the discussion, but I also, because we've got a captured audience, so to speak, that are like-minded, I want them to know what an opportunity we have here, because Carter went out of his way to provide a display for us.
Thank you for that introduction, Brian. I'm not used to that. I'm Carter Keene with Keene Grundhofer Architects, and if this isn't working, I'll speak louder. Is that right?
Just come closer.
What is in the back of the room is a scale model of historic Pensacola Village. We are focused on historic Pensacola Village right now because the West Florida Historic Preservation Board, Rob Overton over here to my right, and the University of West Florida, led by many published articles lately, Matt Altier, the new vice president, is trying to see how he could promote heritage tourism in Pensacola. Now, tourism means more business, more commercial activity, and more people. We need to accommodate these people and be prepared for them before they come here. So we are absolutely studying the infrastructure, and we're doing that on the scale of a block-by-block analysis. We're only focused on Government Street within our parameters, so it really doesn't go as east as far as the main concern everyone has today. But it certainly is a topic of discussion for us. How do you get in? How do you get out? The issue I heard before was it's sort of a dead-end street only used by tourists. I want the tourist to come back the next time. If the tourist comes here and finds dead-end streets, he's not going to tell his neighbor to visit Pensacola. We have an authentic and a wonderful downtown in Pensacola, and we're trying to get our arms around how you address it as Savannah has. If you look at Matt's numbers, you see that 6 million visitors a year come to Savannah and Charleston and St. Augustine, not together, but in each place. Pensacola is entertaining 600,000 heritage tourists every year right now. That could be doubled, it could be tripled. What does that mean? More traffic in the historic district. The neighbors that live there are going to have more people in the street to talk to and say, tell me about your house. Some of you are going to like that. Some of you are not going to like that. I've lived in North Hill now for 25 years, and that's what happens there. And for the longest time, my curb was all torn up because the tour buses couldn't make the turn. So the issue is, we're here, we're wonderful, we are something to see, but we need to get our infrastructure right so that when the tourist comes to visit, that we're prepared for them, and therefore we treat them properly. Last night we had dinner at Dharma Blue. Place was packed. Seville had the Thursday nights. I rode my bike. I had to do an experiment. I rode my bike down from North Hill, leaned it up against a tree, didn't lock it up, went in, had dinner for 2 hours, came back, it was right where I left it, drove it on Palafox Street back home. Palafox was packed. Every single chair along Palafox was full. I don't know if they were drinking beer or wine or water, but I'm suggesting the first two. It was pleasant. It was and it was 10 o'clock at night. I go to bed at 9, so you kept me up. The key is, how do you create a village that wants you to park the car, that invites you to stop, that invites you to walk? Right now, Government Street is not a walkable street, and that's my main goal. Whether it's appropriate to open at night or not is not important to me. I want to focus on the street. I want to focus on each block of the street. And therefore, the people that are here need to be involved. Absolutely. I want to be involved in North Hill. When Alabama Square was falling apart, the residents came together and paid for it themselves, set the example for all the other community projects the city of Pensacola has done, partnering with neighborhoods. That's what this is about. The money is not here to pay for this project yet. But when you create the idea and you begin the ball rolling, then we'll do it block by block. Phase one street pole at a time. The most expensive part of this project is going to get the utilities underground. One of the most important things in this project is to get the utilities underground. So we have to put those two together. Pensacola really didn't have a great history of brick streets, but where there are brick streets, let's get the city of Pensacola to hire a mason on staff all the time, sorry Al, and so that we can repair these brick streets. Because if you ask Orlando about their brick streets, they'll tell you they require less maintenance once they're installed and established than an asphalt street. You might be able to speak to that. So the key is, how can what you're doing, Dan, make heritage tourism a primary objective in this project? Thank you.
Good comments. By the way, we pulled the dimension of the government street. It's 44 feet, which means if you allow for two 10-foot lanes in the center, you're now using 12-foot parking bays. So there is a lot of flexibility, different things you can do with the street. And so whether we feature greening or a slight widening of the sidewalk, whatever, there's plenty of opportunity on government. It really does deserve to be your principal street, east-west. Yep.
I also want to point out something that you said was setting the example. You said that there's an opportunity for some folks in your neighborhood to go after a park and fix it and set the example. And I think that's maybe something that needs to be echoed in what we're trying to do as a group together here, is setting the example for how we conduct ourselves together and how we come together on a vision for this portion of our downtown. I think it's a good idea. Has anyone just gotten too bashful to not get up on the microphone? I'm kind of encouraging you to come. There's one. Would you come up and talk to us, please? I don't think she is.
Do we have index cards so you could write down
I'm so bashful I had to take Dale Carnegie just to stand here. But I've really enjoyed this today, and I do think that there's a lot of opportunities on Government Street to slow it down, to open it up. I think the property values will increase. I think if you don't get it, you need to maybe visit like Watercolor and drive all the way down to Rosemary. Not that we're going to create that here, but we're going to slow it down with our 2 lanes. So I would say, being zoned HC1 or whatever, it's a good thing, and I would endorse it.
Okay. While we're waiting for our next speaker to come forward, the very important thing about whatever your spine street is for a neighborhood, in this case, it really is emerging that government is that key street. That sets the value of all homes in the entire neighborhood. If you have a really healthy, hardy, enduring spine, then all the rest of the streets and all the homes on the rest of the streets increase in their value. There are some streets we've changed in other parts of Florida where we saw a boost in home sale prices going up $150,000 above all other home prices in 1 year. Now those were exotic changes we made, but I think the importance of the value of your principal street for address is that it does influence the pricing of all homes throughout the entire neighborhood. Yeah.
Can I add one before? I've passed out, and some of our staff have also passed out pads with pens. If you just have a comment that you want to leave with staff, write it there and flip the page and hand it to your neighbor. Not all the comments are going to come through the microphone. I wish they would, but let's pass those along to your neighbor. If you don't have anything to write, just hand it over. There's a pen, there's a pad. Please use that and pass it behind if you didn't put anything on there. Thank you very much, and please, sir.
My name is David Dodson. I own property down in the historical district. In fact, I actually did the first building survey back in 1967 when I was only 14 years old. So I've been around the district a long time. And I was with Mr. Mitchell back in 1980 when we got petitioned up almost 100% of the people to keep government open. There were different reasons, though. Mr. Mitchell and Bob Snow, of course, wanted it open for traffic to Seville Quarter. I wanted it open because we could only develop and restore those buildings with commercial funds at the time. You could not get a residential mortgage down there. And then the idea was, at the time, the Preservation Board envisioned a more residential Seville Square than a commercial. I agreed with that. We just had a different manner of how to go about it. I believe that you could restore the district commercially, then eventually it would revert to residential, which it is doing very gradually. But one of the downsides of closing off Government Street was we lost about 33% of the buildings. We lost a lot. So it was a battle we lost, but in the long term, we achieved the goal of creating a residential community down there. So my caution that I want to put out there, if government is opened, and maybe it's just open for egress, but no egress out, just only to go in there south from 9th, as we proposed. Mr. Snow didn't want that. He wanted all or nothing. But the idea being is, if we open it up, values increase, the zoning allows the best use of that property, which then we might see residential going back to commercial. Okay, and so the community that has developed over the last 30 years now is destroyed accidentally by going commercial again. That would be something that needs to be thought out. It's a philosophical problem of, I understand the university wants more bread and breakfasts down there,
If I'm hearing you right, you're asking if we can look at evidence of similar projects where maybe the residential was outmoded by the needs of a commercial, and the residential went away. Is that maybe what we're asking for?
Perhaps, yes. What I'm saying is commercial helped establish the district. It had to financially. Then it's morphed now into mainly a residential neighborhood. I mean, even to the point where restaurants and bars are limited where they can expand to. Okay, so now we have the goal in 67, 68 of a primary residential Seville Square. All right, now are we going to turn it around again and make it a commercial venture, and it's going to be, a very cute celebrations type, very sterile, everything looks alike.
Oh, okay, like a DRI. Yeah, okay. So we can maybe look at that. I don't know how quickly we could get you something on the ideas there, but we've got further meetings going forward, and I think that's maybe something we could look at. But I think your question again is do we risk losing some of the residential character by some of the expansions we're talking about with the tenet of a complete street or a connected street? Is that a good?
I think you can have a complete street scene. They're very walkable, very pedestrian friendly. But I'm not sure if I'm in favor now, 30 years later, of opening the street.
Okay,
at government.
I see.
I think you can implement everything that he's talked about. You can have tree wells. You can do this. You can do a lot of things to make government walkable, bicycle friendly. But I'm not so sure that we need to go back and open it. I've changed my views over 30 years.
Automobile Access Task Force.
I think I'm feeling a unified voice from the audience that the walkability, the livability, the historic preservation, and the social structure of the neighborhood comes first. You want it to be economically viable, where people can get mortgages, they can take care of their properties, and keep this as a unique and distinct historic place, emphasizing walking, biking over speed and driving and things like that. Am I right about that? Yes. Okay. I think your vision has to come first. And then as economic forces enter in, you'll choose to emphasize one style of accommodating commerce or residential or whatever, it'll flow very naturally once all the market forces and all of the passions to preserve the character, the history. I think it'll all work out. But that comes first, is your vision.
We have a comment.
Yes, sir. My name's Rod McGee. I live at 609 Crown Cove, which is where you exit in the first block of Government, where it intersects with 9th. I got here late. I think I'm at this point in favor of opening Government to 9th, but the concern I have, and I wanted to bring to you today, is the speed at which traffic would enter Government Street from 9th Avenue, particularly from the north, and start into Government Street on that first block. In that first block, there are, believe it or not, some 11 residences and 7 businesses. Now, some of those structures have residents on the top floor and businesses on the bottom floor, but in fact, there are many, many people who exit in that first block. And if there's not any type of speed restriction significantly placed as people enter into Government Street, it's there ready for a disaster to happen. There are small children, including my grandchildren, who play there on occasion. I see that as a critical element of your planning and hope that that will be considered.
Good. Very good comment. And one thing I want to share with you. Right now, I've photographed a 30-mile-an-hour posted speed on Government, which to me is exotically high. The first 2 blocks for certain, and I think you'd want to look at it block by block, but the first 2 blocks, I don't think you want a speed any higher than 15. And we designed for that. And what we're now talking about in engineering is that we create what we call a target speed. This is the speed we want people to go. And then we task our designers, landscape architects, engineers, to work together to create that target speed. But I agree with you. The correct speed, leaving the Bay Parkway, is that what it's called?
Bayfront.
Bayfront, should immediately slow motorists down to a very, very appropriate neighborly speed. And 15's about right. You just don't need speed in those 2 blocks at all. And even further down, you don't want much speed. When you go to places like Charleston or Savannah and any great southern city, you find out that people are wanting to drive 15 or 20. If they go out on a major road, then they'll go faster. But once you're into the district where people want to be, they should not have any desire to go more than, say, 15 miles an hour. Yeah. And it certainly shouldn't be posted at 30. I don't know how that ever happened. Nobody can drive 30, can they? Do they? They actually will go faster. Okay, so we can change that.
Jessica.
Hi, my name is Jessica Bell. I've been at most of the urban redevelopment advisory committees as well, and one of the problems they were recently trying to tackle was how do we keep younger people graduating from our universities in Pensacola? And unfortunately, I've heard a lot of people say, I think that we're not Madison, we're not Asheville. Why are we looking at those cities? Well, those are the cities that we're competing with. Those are the cities that people in my generation are choosing. So I think it's really important to learn the lessons from those cities and to adopt. I think it would be a disservice to all the young people here to not take that into account, because that's where people from my generation don't want to wait. We want to go there and have kids and have that sort of lifestyle now. So I would just like to put that out there as well.
Thank you. Derek.
Howdy, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Derek Costin. I'm the Mayor's Public Information Officer. First, I just wanted to take a minute to thank you all for coming and all for staying. I know not everybody has 3 hours to give up on a weekday afternoon, so we appreciate you coming to hear this presentation and to get this conversation started about some of these options. But I just kind of wanted to take a minute to respond to some of the things that I've heard over the course of the afternoon. Especially about the proposal that was offered previously. I want to make sure everyone understands that this isn't a process here that we're starting today that has a pigeonholed result or a pre-written conclusion. Essentially, we realized going through the process last time that it wasn't a viable solution. And so what the goal is here with today and the next 3 workshops is to really restart that process and come to a consensus on what are viable solutions. And so as we move forward over the next month or so, I'd ask everyone to have an open mind and to accept that these 2 different goals, the goals of reconnecting the grid or opening up access to the historic district, and the goal of having safe streets that are walkable and friendly, that don't have speeding issues, those are not mutually exclusive. We can do both of those things, I believe. That's what the mayor believes. And so this process is just about trying to find a solution that will accomplish both of those things, and I think we can do that. So thanks again for coming.
Thanks, Derek. We had a comment that came in via email. Someone was unable to come. They've asked that we sort of bring their ideas forth to the group. I don't mind doing it. There's quite a few, so I'll go through the ideas. The ideas that were presented were to have a 4-way stop. Talbot Wilson presented some of these ideas. To have 4-way stops on all corners within the area, underground utilities, appropriate street lighting, street improvements to exclude the potholes, get them taken care of. Distinctive historic district signs that are specific to the historic district. They look special. Sidewalk construction along all the streets, park and walk areas at the garden, at Garden Alkanes, and some other locations of Main Street in Tarragona, South Tarragona, pedestrian cycle gateway plazas at the end of East Government, and Savalos with a terminus on Alkanes. Okay, well those are the comments that was asked to be read to the group. So again, if they can maybe attend the next ones, we'll talk about some of those more specific ideas. We are in our last 20 minutes of the allotted time for this meeting. I'm going to kind of jump on top of the finality that Derek sort of presented in his comments. We kind of want to talk about the next things we're going to do. So we can bring up lights too. We want to talk about the next things we're going to do with these meetings, and that is the meeting that's upcoming on the 12th. We're planned to be in here from 5:30 to 7:30. We're not going to have as much time, but that's not going to limit what we discuss because we've got a backup meeting that we've scheduled on the 19th. We've got this room reserved for that night as well for the same amount of time. I would like to sort of think that as we've spoken today, a lot of you have already gotten ideas where you may want to weigh in heavily here and also in another group, and that's okay. I don't want you to just spend your mind, about how do I just sit in one group, but I'd like you to at least get that thought in your head. Which one's the most important to me? Is it the way the street looks? Is that what's most important to me? Then I think you would fall into the group for design. And again, this is the group that's going to talk about the design of our streetscape, the intersections of our streets. Dan has presented some really interesting ideas. We'll have access to all of that imagery the next time we meet. We're also looking at a group that's going to talk about walkability. Now, it seems to me that we've had a lot of undercurrent today about the success of us presenting ideas about walkability. They've been presented before. So I would think that we would have a group that's very strong with walkability. So let's also look at, there's another term in that group, that's livability. So these are other ideas. So we're talking about how does this street function for life to occur. Jessica mentioned that does this kind of idea help the young people want to stay here? Does this help folks that are going to perhaps have their grandson walk them to the park in a wheelchair? Can you get there from your front door? And I would say you can't now without getting in the street. So I think that's part of livability. So there's one other group. And then I've got another group that I'd like to get together, and that's the automobile access. I've seen a lot of people very adamant about the way the automobile accesses the street and if it does or not. So those are my three disciplines that I'm going to kind of break apart. They really all will be braided back together on the 26th. On the 26th, we're going to reconvene as a single group in one portion of the room and talk about sort of the findings that we've developed over the 12th and the meetings on the 19th, which we're probably going to be beyond just design. But again, I put the meeting of design forth because really we need to talk about our ideas about livability and automobile access before we can talk about how to design it, truly. So I think the heavy lifting for design is going to come at the end of the process. I think the heavy lifting at the beginning is going to be done by automobile access. I think we've already really come together as a group and found that walkability is important. We can discuss livability as well along with that. So given that, knowing that we're going to have a larger set of responsibilities perhaps in automobile access, I'd like to sort of maybe get you guys to do one thing for me, and that's to group in the room. I guess I'm going to try to put the folks that are interested in the automobile access up here in the front of the room. We're going to try to collect your names. We're going to try to have some sort of hierarchy in that group. In other words, we're going to try to develop a group leader next time, so think about it now. If we could go back to the sign-in table, that's the design corner, and then over here by the coffee, that's the livability and walkability. We're going to have staff come and meet you and talk to you what your name is, what your interest levels are, and so forth. We'll hopefully have city staff as well as planning council staff together with you for the entirety of this process before we come back on the 26th. So we're just sort of here to help facilitate your ideas next time and going forward. So again, automobile access, the front. We're going to have, did I say design here?
Yes.
Design back here, and then walkability, livability back here. Everyone, that's what we want to do for the next 20 minutes, sort of group together, talk to each other, get each other's names, know each other's names, and I think we've had a successful meeting today. Thank you.